We try to get our minds quiet so that we can sort through what's going on inside. If there's a lot of noise, a lot of commotion running around, you can't see things clearly. And there's a lot to sort out. If we could just trust that our minds were basically good, basically pure, it'd be easy. Just go by our nature and everything would be okay. But the minds have lots of different things going inside, skillful and unskillful. And so we need some way to sort them out. First to see, well, what's the big issue? How do we decide what's skillful and not? Because we can be skillful for robbing banks, or we can be skillful for cheating people. But that's not what we want. We want a happiness that lasts, and it doesn't come from robbing banks or cheating people. It comes from getting more sensitive inside to what real happiness is. How it can be found. That's what the Buddha's teachings are all about. Finding happiness that's pure and blameless, true and blameless. In other words, it lasts. It's not going to change into anything else for you. And it doesn't cause any suffering to anyone else. Now, finding that kind of happiness is a rare thing, but it is possible. Human beings can do it. The Buddha could do it. He taught other people how to do it. It's something we can do for ourselves. But first we have to get our minds in a position where we can sort things out. In the beginning you can listen to what the Buddha has to say about what's skillful and not. And you can think about it to the point where it makes sense. But for you to really see for yourself that what the Buddha says is right, and it really does lead to a true happiness, you've got to develop certain qualities in mind. So we try to get the mind to be still. Focus on the breath. Stay with the breath for the rest of the hour. You can tell your mind to do that. It probably won't. It'll probably wander around a bit, but remind yourself this is really what you want to do. Each time you catch it moving off to something else, you bring it back. This is home base. For the time being, any thoughts that pull you away from the breath count as unskillful. And thoughts that help you come back and help you stay here, those are skillful thoughts. It's not like when you meditate you have no thoughts at all. You start out with some thinking. The thinking gets more refined as your concentration gets stronger. But in the beginning you have to herd or ride herd on this committee inside the mind that has all different kinds of opinions about what you want to do with this hour. And when you focus everything on being right here with the breath, try to notice when you breathe in, where do you feel it? It may not be in the same place where you think you should feel it, but notice. This is how you learn things, is by putting your preconceived notions aside and just looking at what's actually happening. So when you breathe in, where do you feel it? There's a movement of energy in lots of different parts of the body. Wherever the movement seems most clear, blatant, easy to follow, focus there. And as you breathe in, notice how long the in-breath feels comfortable, and when it starts feeling uncomfortable. If it starts feeling uncomfortable, stop. You start breathing out. And again, you can breathe out for a while until it's not comfortable, and stop. Try to find just the right spot for breathing in, breathing out. And the needs of the body may change. One kind of breathing will be good as you begin to settle down, and as the mind gets further settled down, another kind of breathing will feel better. There'll be a tendency to want to go for more refined breathing, which is one of the reasons it's good to start with a couple of good long, deep in and out breaths to get your oxygen level up. Then find what feels just right. Deep, shallow, heavy, light, fast, slow. There are lots of varieties you can play with. And anything else that comes up right now, you don't want it. If there are pains in different parts of the body, just let them be. You don't have to get involved. Stay with the parts of the body that you can make comfortable. And as for the different voices chattering in the mind, don't pay them any attention. They'll say things and do things to pull you away, but you don't want to go anywhere else. You want to get the mind really, really still so it can see things clearly. And what usually happens is that you find yourself off someplace else. You don't know how you got there. Well, come right back to the breath and be a little bit more alert the next time. You want to be able to see the process of how the mind distracts itself, because you're going to learn an awful lot about the mind as you watch that process of distraction. Try to cut it off as quickly as you can. And as soon as you feel another distraction getting ready, okay, what are you going to do? Usually it's a sign that the breath isn't as comfortable as it could be, or your attention is getting a little wobbly. So focus in on deeper into the breath, and think of the breath permeating deeper into the body so it feels more nourishing. Ask yourself if there are any parts of the body where the nourishment from the breath doesn't seem to be extending. See if you can let it go in there, into the heart, deep into the brain. Let the breath nourish everything. Because when you start looking at the different voices in the mind, the different urges in the mind, you're going to need to come from a position of comfort, a position of well-being. Because otherwise it's all too easy to give in to the temptation to follow something that's not really skillful. It's because you're hungry. You want some pleasure right now. But if you satisfy that need for pleasure as you stay with the breath, then you can start looking at the different voices in the mind and see some of the things that you used to identify with, that you said, this is me, this is mine. Then they're really not worth it. When the mind is really still and has a sense of well-being, some of these voices really just sound unfriendly. You begin to see who's greedy, who's angry, who's jealous, who's whatever. And because you're not hungry for whatever they promise, you can distance yourself from a little bit. This is a really important skill, because otherwise, if you don't learn how to say no to your thoughts, then they can control you at any time. You may be able to fend them off for a little bit, but then the temptation gets strong and you fall for them. So try to keep the sense of well-being going, get the sense of stillness going. So when things move in the mind, you can see them clearly. And that we can begin to sort out what's really skillful inside and what's not. One thing you may want to watch for is just the level of stress in the mind. Meditation involves some stress as you're trying to get things together. But then as the mind begins to settle down, you begin to realize that a lot of the activity you've been engaged in to keep the mind settled in becomes unnecessary. There's a sense like the center of gravity has shifted, and it's easier to stay with the breath. Now you can step back on the amount of energy you put in, but you get the same results in terms of well-being. Okay, that's a sign that the mind is really beginning to settle down. And you've got your basic principle. You want to be sensitive to the level of stress that you're creating. When the Buddha talks about suffering or stress, it's so that you can see how it comes, see how it goes, see what you're doing to contribute to it. I mean, there's some kinds of stress in the world that are just there because things change. Things are dependent on conditions, and when the conditions change, the things are going to have to change. That's one kind of stress. That doesn't have to weigh on the mind, though. What weighs in the mind is when you cling to things. Say, this has got to be this way, that's got to be that way, this is me, this is mine. And when those things change against your will, then it's going to be suffering. It's just the fact that you're clinging, there's a lot of stress right there as well. You want to see this. And you see how the stress comes, see how it goes. to see that, you've got to get the mind really, really still, so that you do away with some levels of stress, and then you find, oh, there's more subtle ones beneath them that you didn't hear before, didn't notice before. It's like trying to get some peace and quiet in your house. You focus on the loud noises first, and when you get rid of those loud noises, oh, you see there's something more subtle. Okay, deal with that. Once you've gotten rid of that, then you can be quiet for a while. Then you realize, oh, there's something even more subtle than that going on. It's the same in the mind. We've got a lot of clinging, a lot of craving. We have to learn how to sort out which desires are useful and which ones are ones that are going to be unskillful. Right now, the desire to get the mind to settle down is a useful desire, so you stick with it. But there are other desires that you have to sort through. It's not a case where we just let everything just be and accept everything and everything's going to be fine. The Buddha didn't teach a Dharma like that. Some things you accept, some things you don't. Some things you have to get rid of, some things you have to develop. You really have to sort through things in the mind with an eye to what's causing unnecessary stress. That's the big issue. Other issues that can come up in the mind, you want to learn how to put them aside, because this is the important one. We like to think that a lot of lights and flashy things are going to happen in the meditation. And in some people's meditation, these things do happen. But they're not what the meditation is all about. The meditation is all about seeing where you're causing unnecessary stress and suffering and how you can stop. The uncomfortable part of the meditation is you begin to see your own foolishness in doing certain things and thinking certain things and saying certain things that you think are going to be fun, think are going to be gratifying, but they end up causing trouble. These can be blatant or they can be subtle. And so you work from the blatant into the subtle. So to sort things out, you've got to get the mind quiet. You've got to get the mind in a position where it's not hungry for whatever comes up. And you've got to learn how to ask the right questions. We're here to find a happiness that doesn't change. We're here to find a happiness that doesn't harm anybody. That's the basic principle. But you have to realize that the mind has lots of urges that go in all kinds of different directions. So once you've got the mind still, then you have to learn how to be a little bit skeptical about whatever else comes up, to see if it really is useful or not, if it really is something you want to identify with or not. This is why the path requires discernment, the ability to see differences like this. If it were just a matter of accepting, or letting go, in other words, just one thing you had to do, there wouldn't be much discernment. You just do the one thing. Whatever comes up, accept. Whatever comes up, accept. It doesn't require much discernment at all. But we're in the stage of the practice where you have to make distinctions. Some things are skillful, some things are not. Some things are more skillful than others. There are gradations. It requires discernment to see that. The discernment gets sharper the more the mind gets still, the more it has a sense of being well fed by its concentration. This is why discernment is based on concentration. So do your best to master this skill, because it's the basis for all the things you're going to learn that you need to learn to find a happiness that's really going to be satisfying.